We've seen hundreds of deals go through during this summer transfer window, and in today's video we're going to be ranking each Championship club's transfer window from worst to best into the following tier list. The tiers we're going to be ranking each Championship club's transfer business into is the jury's out, so there are a few question marks over it. It was solid, good stuff, or winning the window. Your personal club, which tier would you place your club into? As always, if you do go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. 300 likes would be massively appreciated, but without any further ado, let's jump into the tier list. So we'll start out with Birmingham, who have had somewhat of a weird transfer window, really. They did get a few deals done towards the end of the window. Tahith Chong especially, I think, caught a few people off guard. Birmingham getting that deal done on a permanent basis. And in terms of short-term planning, I do admit that Birmingham have made some, quite savvy signings this season. John Ruddy adds a lot of experience into that goalkeeper department, him coming in on a free transfer. Christian Bielik, if he can stay fit, a terrific loan addition for the season. Obviously, the vast majority of their signings this time around being on loan. The questions I'd have for Birmingham are relating to things like squad depth, particularly in holding midfield. If Bielik does pick up an injury, suddenly they are reliant on some youngsters, with them letting go of Sunjic and Woods as well. And then into those forward positions, I do think there is a desperate lack of firepower in there, and I'm really surprised they didn't go in for a striker in the end. They signed 6 players on loan, but they can only put 5 of those into a matchday squad, which also poses potentially a little bit of an issue for them this season. So short-term planning good, long-term not so sure, albeit Birmingham were limited in what they could have done this window. I'm going to say jury's out because I'm not sure the quality is quite there in a few vital positions, and they are left quite light, particularly in midfield, and they didn't get that striker over the line in the end. But short-term planning may be solid. Looking into the future, I do think the jury's out with Birmingham at the moment in terms of that long-term infrastructure which is currently in place at the club. Next then, let's head over to Blackburn Rovers, who started off quite slow in this transfer window, took their time to get a few deals over the line, but they're coming out of this window looking pretty good, I have to admit. The signings of Dominic Heim coming over and Callum Britton, both really good additions into that back line for Blackburn, and then moving up further on into the pitch. Still not 100% sold on Sammy Smodics given the money they spent on him, but given they kept hold of Brereton Diaz especially, I actually think I'm going to put this transfer window into good stuff for Blackburn. I was almost convinced that Brereton Diaz would end up leaving, and maybe that was the right choice, for Blackburn to go ahead and cash in on him at that point, but no suitable bids did come in for him, and of the signings they made, I actually think they've had a decent window here. Some decent loan acquisitions, spent a little bit of money in improving that back line as well, and with Sammy Smodics coming in, yeah, good window for Blackburn, I'd say. Then when it comes to Blackpool, this window was somewhat of a window of missed opportunities, with that Cameron Brannigan deal still lingering in my head in terms of the business that Blackpool have done. A lot of loan transfers during this window. We expected that to be the case with Michael Appleton coming in, and of those loan signings, I think they've actually done some pretty decent business. What hurts Blackpool in this window, though, is that sale of Josh Bowler right towards the end, and the fact that that went through so late on into the window meant that they couldn't go ahead and replace that quality. They'll probably have a little bit more money now to work with in January, but in terms of the summer transfer window isolated, I'm going to have to put jury's out because they've come out of this window looking weaker than they went into it for me. Bristol City, while there wasn't loads of transfer activity here, I actually think they've had a pretty good window, more so because of the players that they've actually kept hold of and some of the bids they've actually turned down throughout this window. Semenyo looking like that real saleable asset this window, still a Bristol City player. Hanno Masengo, still a Bristol City player. A few of their youngsters who I'm sure there was plenty of interest in as well, and Andy Vyman, all still Bristol City players, as well as making some decent additions on free transfers. We've seen Sykes and Naismith go into that 11. Still think there's more to come from someone like Kane Wilson as well. All things considered, as they couldn't really spend much money, I'm going to put their window into good stuff. I think that's as best as it could have really been for Bristol City this time around, and kept hold of all those big hitters, which is massive. Next then to Burnley, they've had one of the most exciting transfer windows in the Championship, and all things considered, considering how we were looking at Burnley coming into this season, how they've managed to completely rebuild this squad in the image of Vincent Kompany, massively lowered the average age of this team as well, and make a profit on top of that. You know, they've spent 21.65 million in this window, and they've managed to make 50.81 through player sales. Don't get me wrong, all of these signings aren't going to be hits for Burnley. You know, there's going to be a hit to miss ratio, and we'll see what that's looking like at the end of the season. But already, I think there's been some brilliant business done by Burnley here in this window. The signing of Josh Cullen especially, he's really caught my eye so far in this window. Keeping hold of Brownhill was also massive, and I think they've probably played the low market arguably the best out of any championship club, actually, with some of the talent they've got in on loan. Nathan Teller and Ian Maxton being two of those signings, for example. Honestly, I'm going to put Burnley up there into one of the sides who I think has been winning the window. To make a profit and completely rebuild the squad to style a new brand of football is no easy going, and Burnley have managed that this window. Next then to Cardiff. Now, in a very similar vein to Burnley, they've gone ahead and completely remoulded their squad in this summer transfer window, albeit not quite to the same level as Burnley, given the expenditure that they had available to them. Getting that deal done on deadline day, though, for Callum Robinson at a reported 1.5 million, I think is an absolute bargain, and he gives Cardiff that added quality that they've been desperately crying out for in the final third. So very similar to what I said with Burnley, there is going to be a hit to miss ratio when you go ahead and sign this many players, but it's players who are more in tune with the new philosophy of the way that Cardiff want to play. And if we look at all the outgoings here, a lot of older head players who Cardiff had spent money on in the past, who I'm sure were on big earnings, who weren't really offering up that value anymore. I think Cardiff have had a good window to go ahead and shift a lot of those players and bring in a new group with a new style. So yeah, I'm going to put Cardiff into the good stuff tier for me. Looking forward to seeing what they'll be like when things do properly gel for them later on. Next then for Coventry City. Now, the major plus coming out of this window for Coventry is the fact that they've kept hold of those three big hitters, you know, Callum O'Hare, Gustavo Hamer and Victor Gyökeres. However, as a result of that and keeping hold of those players, I do think they've left themselves really short in other positions, and potentially when that's the case, you can argue that it is for the greater good to go ahead and cash in on one of those saleable assets to go ahead and then reinvest in the rest of the squad. They did have the loss of Dominic Heim going, and I'm not sure they've adequately really replaced that quality. Obviously, Callum Doyle and Jonathan Panzo have come in as two loan additions into that back line, but so far this season Coventry have looked absolutely all over the place at the back, and I do think there are quite a few shortcomings in this current squad because of that lack of investment, maybe as a result of not cashing in on one of those players. It's difficult when you don't get a bid that meets your demands, but overall I think the jury's out for this window for Coventry. I really do. We've seen them season upon season building upon last season's finish, and it just feels like maybe this window has been one of stagnation rather than progression for Coventry. After that, for Huddersfield Town, I also have some reservations over their summer recruitment this season. We've seen them struggling in the Championship up until this point, and I do question the quality that's been lost in that squad and maybe not immediately replaced. I do think there have been some nice buys within this one. Obviously, we saw Michael Hewitt coming in on transfer deadline. Then I think that for the future, they've actually invested quite well in some up-and-coming talents. But when you go ahead and lose Lewis O'Brien and Harry Toffolo, your two most utilised outfield players last season, that does leave a hole in your squad. And for the current quality of this group, I'm going to say the jury's out on Huddersfield as well after this transfer window, how they're shaping up at the moment and how much quality's actually been lost in that squad. Hull City, quite an up and down transfer window, but it was such an exciting one. Obviously, the sale of Keane Lewis-Potter has ultimately gone ahead and funded this entire window for Hull. When you lose your best player, you know, it's never great, but to go ahead and have this complete restructure of the rest of the group, it is incredibly exciting, and I do think that Hull have made some of the signings of the season so far. You know, in the glimpses we've seen of Seri, he's been an absolute orchestrator of that midfield. Oscar Estupinan especially looks like an absolute bargain picked up on a free transfer. I think there have been quite a few of those for Hull this season. I'm going to put them into the top tier for me in winning the window. Their squad is undoubtedly better now than it was this time last season, and that's along with losing their best player. Getting Jacob Greaves tied down to a new deal is also absolutely massive for them. So yeah, Hull winning the window for me, they're right up there. After that then for Luton Town, who always go about their business quite well, and I think they've done exactly the same in this window. When we had the loss of Cal Naismith early on in this window, we thought that, okay, maybe this is a bit of a worrying sign of things to come, of a sort of mass exodus of players leaving Luton, but since his departure, that's really not been the case, and I think they have improved quite a few positions, particularly up the pitch with the signings of Coley Woodrow, and especially Carlton Morris, who's really hit the ground running so far. I think Luton breaking their transfer record on him. Potentially a little bit light at the back, so I'm not going to put them to the top category, but good stuff from Luton, all things round. I think they've had a really good window. Next then for Middlesbrough. Now, a lot was expected of them during this transfer window with, the sales of Jed Spence and Marcus Tavernier, two of their most saleable assets, ultimately bringing in a lot of money, and the money we also expected Middlesbrough to go ahead and spend as well. They didn't get all of their targets over the line in the end. I think they have left themselves a little bit short in midfield, and also, it's been well documented that they were after another option up front as well. But of the business that they have done, I think they have made some very good signings. Zach Stefan, I think, is an improvement in their goalkeeping department. Muniz, really excited to see how he gets on over a full season in the Championship, this time with Borough. Ryan Giles, probably the best loan signing of the season this time around. And then we also get into the deals for the likes of Marcus Force, Matt Clark, and the rest of them. Alex Mowat and Darragh Lenihan both coming in on free transfers. Overall for Borough, I'm going to say good stuff for them this window. I would have pushed them up into winning the window had they got that other striker target over the line and maybe another midfielder to add some more depth and competition into that side as well. But there's no doubt they've added a lot of quality into that squad this summer. I also quite like the deals that Millwall have got done this summer. It started out on a bit of a sour note with Jed Wallace departing, but I actually think that Gary Rowett has had a decent amount of backing here to go ahead and strengthen quite a few notable positions. Benik Afobe comes in on a permanent basis. George Honeyman, I think a really savvy pickup earlier on in the window, coming over from Hull City. And then the likes of Charlie Cresswell coming in on loan, Callum Stiles coming in on loan on transfer deadline day as well. Really like that addition for the season. Millwall, another one I'm going to put into the good stuff window. Another one where I've got similar thoughts on is Norwich City. Managed to keep hold of the vast majority of their big hitters, Max Aarons, Timu Pukki, a few others, still Norwich City players. And they've also gone ahead and put their money where their mouth is. Gabriel Sara, who we've not really seen all too much of so far, went ahead and splashed out on him. Nunez, who's looked absolutely brilliant in midfield so far, also coming in for quite a sizable chunk. And then the likes of Aaron Ramsey and Isaac Hayden coming in on loan deals. Not loads of business done by Norwich, but because of the players they've kept hold of and that quality that they have added, I'm going to say good stuff for Norwich again. After that, we then get to my team, Preston North End, and this one has been a real mixed window for Preston. Last season, we were massively reliant on those loan players who we've since gone ahead and lost, and we've also had quite the exodus of players who we've gone ahead and released, players we've got off the wage bill who were taking up quite a sizable wage and weren't really offering us much in terms of playing time. And of the deals that we have got done, I think we've had a pretty good window. Robbie Brady's come into our first 11, improved us. Freddie Woodman, to get him on a permanent basis, I think is absolutely massive. He's been excellent so far this season. I think we played the loan market fairly well with both Alvaro Fernandez and Troy Parrott doing well so far, albeit Parrott hasn't quite found his feet in front of goal. The gripe I have with North End is the positions that we've not improved that we obviously needed to. Another striker was absolutely needed, and so was a right wing back in this window for me. We have kept hold of Emile Rees though, and I think we will just about get by until January. Overall, I'm going to chuck us into that solid tier because I do like the deals we've done. I thought our window got off to a good start, but to not get another striker and a right wing back over the line, I can't push us any higher than that, I don't think. Next then for QPR, and to be honest, I've got a lot of similar thoughts for QPR's window that I share with North End really. Of the business that they have done, I think they've picked up some decent deals on free transfers, a few loans coming in. I think that Ethan Laird loan deal especially is going to be an absolute game changer for QPR this season. And they've also gone ahead and cleared out the wage bill a little bit with some earners there who weren't really offering much last season. However, to have not got in a striker, given how light they are looking in that area, does bump them down a tier for me. So I'm going to say it was a solid window, all things around, for QPR. Of the additions they have made, I think they've done some good business, but to not get a striker in, I was quite surprised at, given how many they've been linked to throughout the entire window. Next then for Reading, who obviously were working under quite strict circumstances for what they were actually allowed to do in this transfer window. Didn't get off to a great start with the likes of John Swift, Josh Laurent and Andy Rinamoto all leaving, but given how much they were actually limited in the deals they could do, they've actually put together a quite decent looking and competitive squad for the Championship. Keeping hold of Lucas João until at least January is also absolutely pivotal for Reading this season. We've already seen how vital his goals will be in terms of a points return for them, and with the deals they have done on loans and free transfers, considering their circumstances, a really solid window, and maybe even you could push them up to good stuff considering those circumstances, but compared to everyone else and the deals they've done, it's at least solid for Reading for me. I think you can also say the same about Rotherham as well. Bit of a worrying start to this transfer window for Rotherham with the losses of Michael Ahekwe, Michael Smith leaving. Obviously we knew about Freddie Ladipo leaving as well, and that squad was suddenly, being stripped away, and we were thinking, oh god, we may be in for another season of, Rotherham losing those saleable assets and not being able to compete. But on the budget that they've been on, I actually think Rotherham have made some quite savvy purchases so far, and that's how Rotherham have to operate to go ahead and be competitive with the rest of the pack in the Championship. No other massive sales as well, apart from those they lost on free transfers. So overall, I'm going to say it was a solid window for Rotherham, absolutely giving themselves every chance of survival. Next then to Sheffield United, arguably the signing of the summer in Hemed Hozic, and I think the Blades have had a really good transfer window actually. Not a whole load of business has been done, but you don't need loads of signings to go ahead and make up a brilliant transfer window. I think they've added real quality into this squad. That deal right there I think will go down as one of the best signings this season. They've also played the loan market well, whilst also keeping hold of their major saleable assets. Sander Berge still being a Sheffield United player, I think arguably pushes them up into winning the window. I think they've done some brilliant business, and I think their overall squad is looking like one of the strongest in the Championship. Next then for Stoke City, quite the overturn of players this season for Stoke. If we look at the outgoings there, how many actually went ahead and left, and the incomings, the volume of players that have come in, I do think they've played the loan market quite well, like the addition of Dujon Sterling coming in later on into the window, Liam Delap as well, still really yet to see what he's capable of doing, but no doubt a player with a lot of pedigree. And then the deals on free transfers for the likes of Dwight Gale and Josh Laurent especially, that go ahead and add a bit more quality into that side. It does, I'm not sure if this squad is totally aligned with what Alex Neil wants from a team, and from that strategic point of view, it is a little bit bizarre that Stoke decided to stick with O'Neill for as long as they did, then sack him, then bring in a manager like Alex Neil with a totally different philosophy. Goalkeeping department, still a little bit of an issue. I'm going to put Stoke down as a solid window. Like some of the additions they made, but I'm not totally convinced that this squad is in tune with how Alex Neil's going to want to play. I think they've left themselves short of a goalkeeper as well. Next then, speaking of Alex Neil, for his former club Sunderland, a fair bit of money spent, to be fair, considering this is their first season back up in the Championship. Over $5 million being spent. No real major departures from last season either, and they've made this squad more competitive. They've added quality, and what I like most of all about their recruitment is look at the average ages here of all the players they've gone ahead and picked up. I think they've also played the loan market very well throughout this window as well, albeit they probably are still short in a few areas, but I think that applies to most clubs. I'm going to put Sunderland's window down as the good stuff. I think considering this is their first season back, they've added players who are going to add something right now, but are also going to go ahead and grow with the club as they continue to go up through the gears. Yeah, good stuff for me, Sunderland, in this transfer window. I think they played it really well. Next then for Swansea City, who I'm a little bit 50-50 on this window overall. Obviously the major sale from Swansea was Flynn Downs. No deals going through in the end for either Michael Obafemi or Joel Perreault, who are both Swansea City players. I think that's massive to keep hold of both of those. I do like some of the additions that they've made. Harry Darling especially over from MK Dons at only 22 years old, I think will continue to grow into that role. albeit maybe they've left themselves short of a few positions. Another creative spark I certainly don't think would have gone amiss for Swansea. I'm going to chuck them into the solid window category, a little bit 50-50 with them, but keeping hold of Perot especially was massive for this window. After that we then head to Watford. I think most of Watford's success in this window has come from the players that they've kept hold of rather than some of the additions they've made, albeit I think they have made some nice pickups. Obviously we've seen Bayo involved in a few of the goals so far. I think that Keenan Davis, when he gets his fitness up, will be a terrific signing as well, as will Courtney House and Hamza Chowdhury for the season. Quite a lot of outgoings in terms of those departures, but the big thing is that João Pedro and Ismaila Sarr are still Watford players. Ridiculous they'll be playing in the Championship this season. Two of the best players in the league at their disposal. And on paper, Watford do have one of the best squads in the league. My only gripe with Watford's business throughout this window is I still don't feel like this is a squad which is totally in tune with how Rob Edwards wants to play, which is a little bit of a problem. It does feel like the recruitment strategy has been a little bit mismanaged maybe. You know, the absence of another right wing back and a few other options coming in maybe leaves them a little bit short of their desired system and way of playing. So I'm going to say Watford's solid. You could argue good stuff because they've kept hold of those two big hitters, but I'm going to chuck Watford in solid because of play style. I'm not totally sure if this squad is fully up to scratch with what Rob Edwards would have wanted. Next then to West Brom, who have had a real mixed bag of a transfer window if I'm being honest, because of the business that they have done and the players they brought in. I think they brought in some real quality to this squad. They got off to a fantastic start in this window, particularly with the arrivals of Jed Wallace and John Swift, getting you Cashflow in on a permanent basis, also absolutely massive. However, going off a few of the departures, obviously we saw Robinson going out on deadline day and stuff like that. I do think they've left themselves really light in some areas at the back and further forward, a bit into midfield and not getting that other number 9 over the line in the end. I'm going to say it was solid for West Brom in the end. You know, earlier on in the window I would have said good stuff because I think they've done some great business on free transfers, but the fact that now they may be dipping into the free agents market to go ahead and plug up some of those gaps, I was surprised they didn't bring in another goalkeeper if I'm being honest after the departure of Sam Johnson as well. I'm going to say solid from West Brom. They brought in some good players. I just think they've left themselves too light in some positions. And then finishing off with Wigan Athletic, quite slow to get off the mark in this transfer window, Wigan, but in the end I think it's turned out to be a pretty solid window for them, given that it's their first season back up in the Championship. Obviously Ryan the Ambi signed to go ahead and kick off things. Some decent additions on loan deals as well, particularly with Ashley Fletcher and Nathan Broadhead coming in to add a little bit more depth into their forwards department. Midfield potentially looking a little bit light, but I'm going to say it was a solid transfer window for Wigan nonetheless. There we have it though guys, those are my personal rankings for each Championship club's summer transfer business. There are a few which I am a little bit conflicted on that I could move, you know, potentially up a tier, potentially down a tier. There's not all too much between some of these, but as of right now, that's sort of what I'm thinking for each club in this window. Do you agree with my selections? Let me know in the comments down below. Where would you personally place your team and who has had the best and worst transfer window in the Championship? Apart from that though guys, thank you very much for tuning in and I'll see you all in the next one.